Friends, pray with me. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations in all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. Amen. It's ironic that here it's World Communion Sunday, where we're remembering that millions of Christians are doing this all together at the same time. It's a big show of unity, and our scriptures are about small things. We're supposed to remember how vast the global church is, but today's parable is about faith in mustard seeds and little bits of leaven in the dough. So small. It's the trace amounts, right? A little leaven in the dough, small seeds. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus talks about the power of small things. He noticed the widow who put in her last penny. That was the great gift. He fed 5,000 people with a little boy's lunch. 5 loaves, 2 fish, that was all. He did not say, go forth and build mega churches to my name and great cathedrals, but rather, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I will be right there. Small is beautiful. But we live in a culture where we often think bigger is better. We as Americans, we have larger houses, bulkier cars, bigger burgers, bigger bellies than the rest of the world. And small thinking is seen as a fault. We're supposed to scale up, leverage ourselves, amplify our voices through social media. Go big or go home. When we think of the economy, it's not the Small Business Administration or the mom and pop store or the family farms. It's big corporations. In every industry, there's maybe 3 or 4 big companies that's kind of swallowed up everything else. And now we call some of these companies too big to fail. So if they make a mistake, we got to bail them out, right? Is bigger better? Big oil, big pharma, big government, big brother? You know who really liked big things? Rome. Rome loved colossal things, excess, scale, grandeur, big armies, huge temples that were bigger than stadiums. They built wonders of the world. The statue of emperors were taller than their buildings, some 130 feet. It's no wonder they could not fathom a man who said, "Remember me in breaking bread," rather than a giant statue. In the face of the big deal empire, Jesus said, small is where it's at. Mustard seeds and leaven, those aren't just randomly selected small things. Radish seeds are actually smaller, right? But they're invasive, catalytic. How many of you grow mustard in your garden? Anybody? Probably not. You know why? Do you have mint? You know how invasive it is? Imagine if mint grew to 8 feet tall, right? That's what mustard is. It is mint on super steroids. And how much mustard do you really need? And I love mustard. I could almost take it by the spoonful and eat it, but really, you just need to spread a little bit of mustard. It goes a long ways. It's a small thing that's very powerful. And then there's yeast. You don't need a gallon of yeast for your bread, unless you want to make, I calculate, about 341 loaves. couple small teaspoons will do the job. The yeast then starts the chemical process, feeds on sugars that creates carbon dioxide gas that causes everything to rise, and you bake it and it's wonderful. It begins small. You can't even see what it's doing. It just blends in and makes everything explode bigger. Small things can be mighty. Now, this is a great idea in theory, but are small things really enough in practice? Big things are just so big. Injustice is so enormous, and it's well funded too. So do my small efforts matter? Hatred is so overpowering. How can I stand against it, armed with just a still, small voice? What am I going to do with just a jar of mustard seeds and a few slices of bread? I mean, bread and mustard don't even make a whole sandwich, right? It's just the start. We were wrestling with this. I was at a clergy meeting on Monday, and we were all kind of wrestling with some feelings of inadequacy, with just feeling the enormity of the challenges that we have right now. How do we preach a gospel of love when algorithms focus on divisive voices and controversy and conflict? How do we discuss unity and interrelatedness of people when there is no trust? How do we speak truth when we're in separate information universes in how we experience reality? Small does not feel beautiful or powerful. It feels terribly inadequate. I was rescued this week by beavers. True. I came across a news story about beavers, and it started a few years ago in Colorado in the 𝐞𝐲𝐫 Valley. It's up high in Rocky Mountain National Park. And the land there had been degraded and had become quite dry and drought-stricken. Decades of water diversion and overgrazing had dried up these vast wetlands. There used to be elk who waded out into streams, but the streams no longer spread across the valley floor. In fact, when it rained, it had cut narrow channels, and when they did get water, it moved too fast and it didn't seep into the ground so that plants and animals and humans couldn't benefit from it. It just runs off. So a group of conservationists got together and said, how does this place heal? What can we do? And they didn't have much money to bring in a bunch of bulldozers and concrete and so on. And instead, they decided they built these small little wooden structures to imitate beaver dams. And they put them where the water would flow, and when it rained, the water began to pool up a little bit and seep into the ground, and some native plants began to grow. And so this slow, small thing, the next year, a family of beavers moved in. And they saw these, they're the natural hydrology engineers of the planet, and they saw these funny little dams that humans created, and they said, oh no, we have to help these poor people. And they came with their sticks and their mud, and they started building systems and replacing things. More ponds formed, willow thickets flourished, birds nested, fish returned, and the valley began to sing again. Do you know that a colony of 6 beavers can restore wetlands to 8 acres? They're busy little beavers, aren't they? So the state of Colorado established these larger refugia zones in their national parks, and the beavers are working. And one of the great spin-offs of this is that that region is now more resistant to wildfires because the wetlands are restored. Beavers are better at this than we are, and they work for free. Perhaps this helps us expand our sense about what World Communion Sunday is all about. It's not just that we need to work with other churches, but perhaps collaborate wider with all creatures to heal and restore the earth together. When we sing that God has the whole world in God's hands, maybe we need to mean the whole world. All of life, all living things together. And I think this Beaver Project restored my sense of small things make a vital difference. There was an economist, E.M. Schumacher. He wrote a book in 1973, and it was called Small is Beautiful. And he looked at our dominant mode of industrial economies that prized, bigness and growth and big technologies and so on, but often at the expense of people, of communities, of the natural world, of creation. And he argued that sometimes economies need smaller scales, human scaled things that are more sustainable, and that small can be beautiful. And you might think, okay, 1973, right? Hippie, tree-hugging, rainbow hippie kind of stuff, right? Here's a partial list of successes of Schumacher's philosophy. In 1973, nobody had ever heard of a CSA. But now there are 12,000 community-supported agricultural co-ops that deliver fresh vegetables to our kitchen tables. Tomatoes, rutabagas, all of that. That was E.M. Schumacher's idea. He also had the idea of fair trade certification, and it opened up markets to small cooperatives and family little smaller businesses that they could compete and make a living. He urged the idea of sharing economies, which now we have things like community tool libraries, so you don't have to own so many tools, or co-work spaces, or car sharing services. And he never envisioned the internet, but it's given us the potential to do things like free cycle. When you have stuff that's still good and you don't need it, you can put it on free cycle and somebody who wants it comes and gets it. Probably his most significant legacy was in global development work, where a lot of nonprofit NGOs took his philosophy and would work more on a small town or village level with water projects. And there's one particular group called Practical Action, and they've created clean power and fresh water for 47 million people in Africa. Small scale, big results. And I think when we went through the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that some of our big global supply chains were pretty vulnerable. And we thought everybody started getting sourdough starters and making their own bread and paying more attention to our neighbors and realizing that we needed to do things locally and with the people around us, that we were dependent on each other, and maybe we didn't really need all of that cheap stuff from China. But then I wonder if we're slipping back into normal. And maybe what was normal is really abnormal. And we need to think about how do we rebuild our economic well-being right here locally in sustainable ways that's more focused on smaller businesses and a sharing economy. And you know, we do this already. We just don't necessarily think about it. It's what the community refrigerator is. It's neighbors helping neighbors, bringing food, making sure everybody has enough. It's what Rebuilding Together does. Volunteers who will go out and they will fix your roof and repair your house if maybe some folks are too elderly or they can't afford it. And we work together to make sure that this community is sustainable. We need to rethink what too big to fail means. You know what's too big to fail? Earth. Earth is too big to fail. And on Worldwide Communion Sunday, we welcome all of creation to our table. And we look in our hands, and what we receive is really so small. A bite of bread, a sip from a cup, and Jesus saying, "Do this in remembrance of me." Small symbols are powerful. They're symbols of a greater kingdom that is coming among us. Mustard seeds, yeast, a widow's coin, beaver dams woven from sticks. The world tells us go big or go home. But Jesus says God works in what is small and hidden and faithful. We sow the seeds, we knead the yeast into the dough, and as we choose to live in the way of Jesus, things grow. So take courage. Every prayer we whisper, the meals we share, the acts of kindness, every choice to live more gently with creation and with each other, these are kingdom seeds. And they multiply far beyond what we might see happening. So I invite you to our communion table to remember bread and cup of Jesus, but also to be the bread and the cup of Christ to the world. We join with all people and all of creation in the slow, often quiet, and stubborn work of love. For in God's economy, small is not just beautiful, it's powerful. And small is how the kingdom comes. Amen.